You are currently sitting at the very top of a mountain of bones. As a modern human, you carry the unshakable, almost arrogant confidence of a species that has forgotten what it feels like to be hunted. We look at lions in enclosures or sharks behind glass and we see nature, something separate from us, something we've conquered with air conditioning and grocery stores. We have this comfortable collective myth that humans were always the protagonists of the planet, born with a spear in one hand and a plan in the other, destined to rule. But if you were to drop your current self into the East African Rift Valley, 2 million years ago, you wouldn't be the king of the jungle. You wouldn't even be a minor noble. You would be, quite literally, a walking calorie pack for things that viewed your entire existence as a convenient, slow-moving snack. For the vast majority of our evolutionary history, the apex predator title wasn't even a distant dream for us. We weren't the ones doing the chasing. We were the ones hiding in the bushes, hoping the wind didn't carry our scent towards something with 6-inch canines. But here's the weird part. Our entire psychological makeup, the way your heart races at a sudden shadow, the way you feel watched in a dark forest, is a direct inheritance from this era of extreme vulnerability. What most people don't realize is that we didn't evolve to be the masters of the earth. We evolved to be the most paranoid survivors in the history of biology. Think about the physical reality of an early hominid like Australopithecus. You are roughly 4 feet tall. You have no claws, your teeth are better suited for chewing tubers than tearing flesh, and you are arguably the slowest biped on the savanna. To a Dinofelis, a massive prehistoric false saber-toothed cat, you weren't a rival. You were a primate version of a chicken wing. And this is where it gets insane. We weren't just low on the food chain, we were actively being specialized upon. There were predators whose entire evolutionary strategy was centered around how to crack open a human skull as efficiently as a nut. So how did a creature that started as a prey species end up building satellites? And more importantly, what did we have to become to make the rest of the world fear us? The common assumption is that early humans just had to watch out for big cats in a general sense. We imagine a generic tiger or a lion, and we think, sure, that's dangerous. But the reality was much more targeted and much more terrifying. What most people don't realize is that the prehistoric world was filled with specialist man-eaters. Take Megantereon, a cat the size of a jaguar but with the front-heavy build of a wrestler. It didn't hunt like a lion, which often kills through suffocating throat bites. Megantereon used its saber teeth to strike the neck or the skull with surgical precision. It was designed to kill primates quickly, quietly, and with zero chance of retaliation. But here's the weird part that most anthropologists didn't want to admit for decades. We have the receipts. We have the fossilized skulls of our ancestors with 2 perfect circular holes in the cranium that match the exact spacing of a prehistoric leopard's lower canines. We weren't just accidental victims of the wild. We were a staple crop. Imagine living in a world where the sky itself was a source of dread. The Taung child, a famous fossil of an early hominid, wasn't killed by a cat on the ground. Analysis of the eye socket suggests it was snatched from above by a giant bird of prey, an eagle far larger than anything flying today, which pecked through the bone to get to the brain. And this is where it gets insane. This pressure didn't just kill us, it sculpted us. Every time a predator picked off the slowest or the least observant member of a tribe, it was essentially editing the human genome. We are the survivors of a million-year-long horror movie. Have you ever wondered why human infants are so loud when they cry? Yet we have an instinctual, visceral need to quiet them? In the ancient world, a crying baby was a dinner bell for a scavenger 3 miles away. We didn't learn to be quiet because we liked the peace. We learned to be quiet because the alternative was extinction. If the world felt like it was closing in on our ancestors, it's because it actually was. But if we were so clearly outmatched, what was the turning point? What was the glitch in the matrix of nature that allowed the prey to pick up the crown? But here's the weird part. Before we were hunters, we were something much more desperate. We were professional scavengers. Imagine a crime scene on the savannah. A massive saber-toothed cat has just downed a prehistoric zebra. The cat eats the prime cuts, the soft organs, the thick muscle, and then it leaves. Next come the hyenas and the vultures, tearing away the scraps until only the skeletal remains are left, baked dry in the sun. To any other animal, this is the end of the meal. But to an early human, this was the opportunity that changed everything. What most people don't realize is that we didn't start our climb to the top by being brave. We started by being patient. We waited for the real killers to finish, and then we moved in for the only thing left, the bone marrow. Bone marrow is a nutritional goldmine, pure high-calorie fat protected inside a vault of calcium. No other predator had the tools to get to it. But we had stones. This is where it gets insane. Our first major technological breakthrough wasn't a spear to kill a lion. It was a rock to smash a bone. We became the nutcrackers of the animal kingdom. This diet of stolen, high-energy fat is what fueled the sudden, explosive growth of the human brain. We literally ate the leftovers of our superiors to grow the organ that would eventually allow us to outsmart them. But there was a catch. To get those bones, you had to be fast, you had to be quiet, and you had to be willing to stand in the shadow of a predator that could end your entire lineage with a single swipe. We were living on the charity of monsters, and every calorie we gained was a gamble against a gruesome death. And this is where we encounter one of the strangest contradictions in biology. Usually, if a species is a prey species, it stays that way. A rabbit doesn't suddenly decide to start eating wolves. Evolution doesn't just flip a switch from victim to victor. So, how did we break the cycle? The answer lies in a terrifying paradox. We became the apex predator not because we were the strongest, but because we were the most vulnerable. Think about a leopard. A leopard is a masterpiece of solo killing. It doesn't need a team, it has claws, camouflage, and night vision. Because it is so perfectly complete as an individual, it has no biological reason to cooperate. But a human? A lone human is a tragedy waiting to happen. To survive the night, we had to cooperate. We had to share information, we had to develop language to warn each other, and we had to form social bonds that were stronger than the fear of the dark. What most people don't realize is that our weakness was our greatest asset. It forced us to develop collective intelligence. While the big cats were evolving better teeth, we were evolving better networks. We turned our vulnerability into a weaponized social structure. We didn't just bring a stone to the fight, we brought 10 people with stones. Nature had spent millions of years perfecting the individual killer, but it wasn't prepared for the rise of a coordinated, vengeful mob. But here's the weird part. Even with a mob and a pile of rocks, we were still fundamentally soft. If a lion gets within 10 feet of you, the fight is already over. To truly flip the script and move from the menu to the head of the table, we had to invent something that broke the laws of natural combat. We had to invent distance. Every other predator on Earth has to commit its body to the kill. A shark has to bite, a bear has to tackle. They have to put their own skin in the game, but humans? We decided that was a bad deal. What most people don't realize is that the invention of the projectile, the simple act of throwing a sharpened stick, was the most unfair move in the history of evolution. It was the first time a prey species could kill its predator without ever entering the danger zone. And this is where it gets insane. We didn't just stop at spears, we mastered persistence hunting. Because we could sweat and walk on two legs, we became the Terminators of the savannah. We would find a faster, stronger animal and just walk at it for hours. In the heat of the midday sun, when every other predator was hiding in the shade, we were the only ones moving. We would follow them until their hearts literally gave out from heat exhaustion. We didn't win because we were faster. We won because we were the only species that refused to stop. We turned the psychological trauma of being hunted into a tactical nightmare for the rest of the animal kingdom. We became the thing that follows you, never stopping, never tiring, until you simply collapse. Today we look at the world and see a planet we've completely redesigned for our own comfort. We've paved over the stalking grounds, and we've relegated the monsters of our past to endangered species lists. We feel safe, but if you look closely at human behavior, the ghost of the hunted is still there, rattling its chains in our DNA. Why do we have a universal fear of the thing under the bed, or the monster in the closet? Why does a dark basement trigger a cold sweat in a grown adult? It's because for 2 million years the dark wasn't empty. It was occupied by specialists who were better at being alive than we were. What most people don't realize is that our modern anxiety, that low-level feeling that something is wrong, is just a survival mechanism with nowhere to go. We are high-performance prey animals living in a world without predators. Our brains are still scanning the horizon for the Dinophilus, but all they find are emails and social media notifications. And this leads to a disturbing paradox. We spent hundreds of millennia trying to reach the top of the food chain so we could finally stop being afraid. But now that we're there, we've realized that the fear was what made us us. It was the engine of our creativity, the reason for our social bonds, and the architect of our intelligence. Without something hunting us, we've started to turn that predatory instinct inward. It makes you wonder if we ever encountered something truly superior to us again, something that viewed us with the same cold, caloric indifference that the saber-toothed cats once did. Would we even remember how to be the prey? Or have we spent so much time as the masters of the world that we've forgotten the very skills that allowed us to survive it in the first place? We aren't the natural kings of this planet. We are just the cleverest victims. And in the grand timeline of the Earth, titles like Apex Predator have a funny way of being temporary. What would it take for the world to remind us where we actually belong on the food chain?